Welcome to AMT Standard Bank Fresh Produce Market Overview. In this week's episode, proudly brought to you by Standard Bank and Villa, we look at the latest price movements and focus on demand shifts on the market and also see what impact it can have as we head towards the end of this month. All in this week's episode, so make sure to stay tuned. Our biggest movers for the week was grapes with a 43% jump in prices, while tomato prices dropped by more than 22% week on week. There is a glimmer of hope that demand can start to pick up later this week, which can support some prices on the markets. But demand is still very low at the moment. But with that, let's dive into the latest prices of the week. As expected, the national average potato price decreased sharply last week to an average price of R45.99 per 10 kilogram bag. Large potatoes traded lower on 51, mediums on 44 and smalls on 32 rand. Mondials dropped to 43 rand, while Cifras came in at 55 rand on average. The average price for all class 1 potatoes across all sizes and markets was on 50 rand 66. There is some positive news coming from the markets, with Joburg, Durban and Tshwane markets selling out over the past weekend. This will bring some support to the markets, especially over the start of this week. There are also some signs that demand is also starting to pick up, especially from the large retailers. So there is some positive news for the short term. Over the next 3 to 4 months, however, the volumes from especially Limpopo that can peak around September, October can keep the market prices under pressure over this period. In 2022, we had a similar situation, with prices remaining well below the 50 rand mark until October. So expect prices to be driven by demand changes over this period. The average onion price decreased by 6% to 63.27 rand per 10 kilogram and is now 18% lower than a year ago. Brown onions averaged on 64, red onions increased to 131 rand and white onions decreased to 60 rand. Large onions traded lower on 71 rand, mediums lower on 72 and smalls at 38 rand. We're still on a similar trend as last year, when we saw prices dropping from current levels to about 50 rand in September. We, however, expect demand to start improving over the next week or two, which can give short-term support to the onion price. Tomato prices decreased last week and traded 22% lower on 9.31 rand per kilogram. Large tomatoes traded at 8.73 rand, mediums at 10.07 rand and smalls at 8.36 rand. Volumes are not extremely high, but demand is still struggling to keep up as the markets are very quiet at the moment, which is likely to drive prices further downward, especially over the start of this week. Carrot prices increased by 5% last week to 5.97 rand per kilogram, mostly due to 10% lower volumes reported week on week. The average carrot price is now 52% higher than a year ago, while volumes were 17% lower year on year. Large carrots traded on 6.24 rand, mediums at 5.21 rand and smalls on 3.44 rand. It is starting to look that prices can stay on these higher levels for the next few months, despite the markets being very quiet at the moment. This video is proudly sponsored by Villa. Through world-class technology like Masterlock, localized for South African conditions, Villa helps you manage risk, increase productivity, and get it right the first time, backed by research that keeps you ahead. The average pepper price increased by 5% to 23.48 rand per kilogram. Green peppers came in higher at 16.99 rand, yellow peppers dropped to 34.54 rand, and red peppers decreased to 35.82 rand. The lower volumes and higher expected demand over the next 2 weeks can result in slightly higher prices as we move towards the end of this month. Cabbage prices decreased by 3% to 3.02 rand per kilogram and is likely to also increase slightly this week. Garlic prices traded sideways on 79.05 rand, with a local garlic higher on 84.22 rand, while imported garlic dropped to 73.65 rand. Garlic prices will likely remain on a higher level during July, or what's remaining of July, and then start trickling downwards from August onwards. Spinach prices decreased to R4.47 per kilogram, while sweet potato prices increased slightly to R4.74 last week. Pumpkin prices increased sharply and traded 16% higher on R4.16, while butternuts increased slightly to R6.04. Green beans dropped by a massive 26% to R14.16, while cucumbers traded 3% higher on R14.01 last week. Our latest reports are also now available on our website, so go check them out at amtrends.co.za now. In the fruit markets, the average banana price increased by 2% to R6.84 per kilogram last week, which is about R123 per 18 kilogram box. It looks like prices can drop slightly the coming week due to very low demand expected for this week and the markets that are very quiet at the moment. Apple prices traded on R9.45 per kilogram, while pear prices increased to R9.36, trickling slightly upwards. Orange prices decreased by 1% to R4.62. We still anticipate orange prices to remain on a lower level over the following 2 to 3 months due to higher expected volumes on the markets. Avocado prices increased by 6% to R17.70 per kilogram. Vietes traded on 22, Haas on 15 and Pinkertons also on R15 per kilogram. Expect prices to remain in this slight upward trend until October, after which it can start to increase more significantly as the season comes to an end then. The average grape price increased by 43% last week, a significant jump to R56.83 per kilogram. We still expect grape prices to peak in July and remain on a higher level in August when volumes on the markets are extremely low. Pineapple prices increased to R9.57 and is likely to bottom out in July and August this year. Lemons increased to R5.47, while the average blueberry price dropped by almost 30% to R72 per kilogram last week. This episode was proudly brought to you by Standard Bank and Villa. For more detailed insights, forecasts and free downloadable tools, visit amtrends.co.za now. I'm Dr. Johnny van der Merwe. Thanks for watching, and remember to tune in next week for more on the fresh produce markets in South Africa.